Hello amigos, I'm Pablo Garcia, the engineer photographer. We now have a number of tools that use artificial intelligence to remove noise from our photos. They will take, many of them, a raw file, demosaic, and then at the same time remove noise. And many times the results can be amazing. They can even change our comfort level with high ISOs on the images that we take. Now, they will generate either a DNG file or a TIFF, sometimes JPEGs, it does your choice, and we can then edit those files. But how big are those files compared to the original RAWs? That's what I wanted to find out. As I mentioned in the intro, today we're going to see how big are those files that the AI-driven tools that remove noise generate. And I chose 5 tools that I had bought, all of them with my own money. This video is not sponsored by any of them, only by my wallet. So let's take a look at what are those tools. The first one is Lightroom Classic, which is the tool that I use to edit my images, and Adobe introduced an AI capability a couple months ago. And in one of these corners, you can see a video I did on comparing the two options within Lightroom Classic. Then we have DxO Pure Raw 3, which is my favorite plugin for removing noise. Topaz Denoise AI, which was one of the pioneers on this space. Topaz Photo AI, which is a new tool that came out a little over a year ago, and then on one No Noise AI that also can produce great results. So we're going to be evaluating the results from these 5 tools. Now, how did I go about the testing? Because all the tools do noise removal, but also they can do a few other things. Well, let's start with a few things that I did. One, I make sure I use the latest updates on the day that I generated the files. I make sure I had the latest updates. Second, I use the tools as a standalone. Even though I use Lightroom and a couple of the tools like DxO Pure Raw 3 and Photo AI allow me to send a raw file to them, the others denoise and on one only take TIFFs when you come from Lightroom. So I decided to use the tools on a standalone and directly bring the raw files to them. The next is that the tools do more than just noise reduction. Sometimes they can correct sharpening, or they're going to correct for lens distortion. So I turned all those options off, and I left noise removal in auto. I wanted to compare apples and apples. I used 2 different files from 2 different cameras. One from a Canon R5, 45 megapixel, full frame, and the other one from a Canon R7 APS-C sensor at 32 megapixels. Both cameras had the latest firmware. And I selected in the cameras full-size RAWs, because many times our cameras, you have the full-size RAW and either a compact or a small RAW option. So I went with the full-size RAW. And both images were taken at ISO 5000, so they had a similar level of noise. I also generated DNGs for all these tools, except on one No Noise that allows you to select color space. For DNG, you just say select DNG. For TIFF, all the tools give you a different options, 8-bit versus 16-bit. I selected 16. Compression or no compression, I selected no compression. Color space. You have large color spaces like ProPhoto and Adobe, or a small color space like sRGB. So I selected, when given the option, one of the large color spaces, ProPhoto or Adobe RGB. Now, here we are. We're looking at the DNG file sizes that came in after noise removal. And what we're going to see is the original raw file, the .cr3 file that came from Canon. The original file for the R5 was 61 megabytes, and the Canon R7 was 48 megabytes. Those are the original file sizes. Lightroom Classic version 12.4 produced a DNG for the R5 that was 220 or 165 for the R7. And here in this table, you can see the file sizes that the different tools produce. On this column, this is times, is the number of times how big is that file compared to the original file. For example, Lightroom Classic 220 megabytes is 3.6 times larger than the original of 6.13. The R7 at 165.9 is 3.4 times larger. If you look at pure raw, it's 2.6 and 2.6. Denoise end up creating very large files, both Denoise and Photo AI. They probably use the same engine for DNG creation. File that is 4 times larger for the R5 and almost 4 times larger, 3.8 for the R7. And the big surprise is that the files coming from no-noise were just 2.2 times larger than the original files. I wasn't expecting these. I was expecting all of them to be about the same size, but we see a big size difference, right? From 2.2 times on the low end to as much as 4 times, more than 4 times larger with Topaz Denoise and Photo AI. Lightroom, which is the tool that I use to edit, and it's probably the latest entrant into this field at 3.6. My favorite plugin, which is Pure Raw 3 at 2.6. So big surprise here on DNG. How about TIFF? You see results that are very consistent regardless of what tool we use. For full-size camera, all of them gave me about a factor of 4.2. 256 megabytes, 4 times larger than the original RAW. For the Canon R7, 3.8, basically almost a factor of 4. A little less, a little more, but TIFF files are going to be much larger. Now, when it comes to TIFF files, depending on the tools that you use, you may have the option to use compression, zip or LZW. Both of them are compression modes that are lossless. It means you can compress the size and don't lose information. How big can you compress? Well, it depends. If you go to an 8-bit file, you compress a lot. If you have a file that has a lot of detail, the compression is not going to be as much. If you have a file that has large areas with almost no detail, like blue skies, for example, is going to compress more. So you may get 20, 30, 40% compression depending on the image. Something just to read about, and that's something I didn't know until I started reading about the compression options, is that the LZW, if you're compressing 16-bit files, you may actually end up with files that are larger after compression than the original file. So the recommendation is, if you want to compress, use zip. Now, it may take a little bit of time to save the file, a little bit of time to open the file, but compression using zip and LZW is something that is very common across all the tools. So compression can give you a little bit extra space, for example. But compared to DNG, TIFF is going to be quite a bit larger. So what I learned from this test is that DNG files are going to be smaller than TIFF, that On1 No Noise and DxO Pure Raw 3 are going to generate the smallest DNG files. And actually, I have a lot more experience with DxO Pure Raw 3. And I haven't seen any issues with the quality of the DNG that tool produces. Well, amigos, here are some quick results. I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to leave you again with a video that I did on Lightroom noise reduction, the original option and the AI option. I hope you like it. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like this content. Help me grow the channel by giving me a thumbs up and sending me your comments, and I'll see you next time.